Tonight, evacuations underway as the far north Queensland flood crisis continues. Also, more supplies enter Gaza, but aid agencies say it's not enough for desperate locals. The nervous wait ends for thousands of Year 12 students across the state. And Nathan Lyon's 500th wicket puts him amongst the greats of the game. Good evening, Jessica Harmsen with ABC News South Australia. Far North Queensland is facing one of its worst flooding events in decades. The Defence Force has been enlisted to help after record rains from ex-tropical cyclone Jasper. The small Indigenous community of Wudjul is among the hardest hit, but there have also been hundreds of people evacuated from Cairns' northern beaches. As the rain eases, towns across the far north remain isolated with no power and major roads cut. Christy Sexton-McGrath reports from Cairns.
For the far north, this disaster is unprecedented. Jaw-dropping amounts of rain have wrought widespread havoc.
It's no longer the Captain Cook Highway, it's the Captain Cook River.
The record-breaking deluge has threatened lives, destroyed properties and isolated towns. Just before midnight at Wudjul, the water rose quickly.
We had to swim out of there. I had my dog there as well.
There was no help coming as 16 people, including a 7-year-old boy, took refuge on roofs.
Mate, there's no one up here. We're pretty much on our own.
The Deputy Mayor returned this morning to find his childhood home, everything he owns, destroyed.
Lucky we got out of here. We lost everything. We had, have photos.
Patients and staff spent a terrifying night trapped on the roof of the local clinic before getting themselves to safety. Isolated and without power, the clock is ticking for the whole community to be evacuated.
An attempt was made to aerially evacuate Wudjul today, but unfortunately the rain and cloud is still too strong.
With lives in the balance, the Army has been brought in to help.
This event is not over.
Dan Bateman's Cairns home is knee-deep in brown water. He was among 30 people who huddled together in torrential rain on the roof of a house before being rescued.
We had to dodge fridges floating past, big branches. At one point, someone said there was a cow coming down the road.
They're now safe in an evacuation centre.
We went to the bus and we came here.
Emergency crews spent today ferrying people to safety across the raging Barron River.
There are some individual locations that it is very difficult to get to.
Stephanie Schumacher escaped her flooded home with her daughter and pets.
Horrible. Horrible. It was really horrible.
North of Cairns, devastation in Mossman. The SES has responded to more than 40 requests for help every hour for the past 24 hours.
What we've seen over the last couple of days has been absolutely devastating.
This exhausted wallaby was saved.
Attaboy.
To the south, in the centre of Ingham, a potent reminder of what can lurk in floodwater.
You always wanted to see a crocodile?
The 2.8 metre croc was soon roped, wrangled and safely stowed.
Tightened the noose up and basically played him like a fish.
A spectacle for locals. It'll end up in a farm or zoo.
Crocs everywhere here now.
The Euramo pub, temporarily more like a yacht club.
We do understand that there is a lot of places in North Queensland that are absolutely devastated by these floods. We're lucky our water disperses very quickly.
While the rain has eased for now and floodwaters are receding, the far north is not out of the woods yet. Many residents are still without power, roads are damaged, and people are being asked to conserve drinking water as treatment plants come back online.
Danger and heartbreak a week out from what should be the happiest time of year. Christy Sexton-McGrath, ABC News, Cairns.
South Australia's budget has returned to a slender $41 million surplus after 4 years of deficits. Treasurer Stephen Mulligan says increased employment and higher property values help to improve the budget bottom line. He says the state's debt position is also lower than forecast, but expenses blew out by $460 million.
Look, you'd always like your surplus to be higher, of course. You'd always like to continue improving your budget metrics. But we think this is a really important milestone for the state and for the state's finances.
What we've seen really is a government that have been bailed out by significant increases in both state and federal taxation revenue.
The Israeli army says it's uncovered its biggest Hamas tunnel yet, revealing images and video of what it claims is a 4-kilometre network built to stage large-scale attacks. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has hit back at calls for a renewed ceasefire, saying Israel will fight to the very end.
Buried under a sand dune, Hamas's intricate labyrinth revealed.
We are going to enter to the biggest tunnel we found in Gaza. It was a secret.
The sheer size big enough to drive through, designed to carry carloads of fighters towards Israel or move hundreds of hostages away, underground, undetected.
Hamas has spent millions of dollars in this project specifically.
The entrance emerges only walking distance from Israel's southern border, snaking 4 kilometres in length, descending 50 metres deep, enforced with steel and concrete. This, the Israeli army says, is the tunnel being built by Hamas militants. The Israeli Defence Force is using these videos to repair its campaign reputation after a bungled operation saw 3 Israeli hostages killed at the hands of their own army. The trio were unarmed, holding this, a makeshift white flag, with a plea for help written in Hebrew with leftover food.
I think they did everything possible so that we would understand. They moved around shirtless so that we wouldn't suspect them of carrying explosives, and they held a white cloth.
One of the men now laid to rest at home.
My child, you were strong. You were a hero. You survived 70 days in hell. Sadness has no end. Love you, Mum.
Israeli media is reporting hostage release negotiations will resume with Qatar as mediator. And although a growing number of Israelis are concerned this campaign is endangering the lives of those held captive, Benjamin Netanyahu is steadfast the war is needed to eradicate Hamas and bring hostages home.
We will fight till the end, and we will achieve all our objectives, eliminating Hamas and ensuring that Gaza will not become again a centre for terror.
Right now, the World Health Organization says Gaza is a scene of horror.
The emergency department is just covered in blood and there are very few staff. Children are being treated on the floor for serious injuries. It's absolute chaos.
Israel's been pushing Gaza's 2.3 million residents south. Nearly half are estimated to be squeezed into the border town of Rafah. As aid trucks dribble in, Gazans jump on, looting what they can. Another glimpse into the desperation of the starving and war-weary in this enclave. Alison Horn, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Vladimir Putin has vowed to make Russia a self-sufficient power in his first campaign speech before a March vote. The Russian president will stand for a 5th Kremlin term in an election that will likely prolong his rule until at least 2030. Prominent critics who could challenge him on the ballot are either in jail or living abroad. But a little-known presidential hopeful who's called for peace in Ukraine has inched closer towards formally registering as a candidate. The former journalist Yekaterina Duntsova has spoken of being afraid after the launch of her bid. The trial of media mogul and pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai has begun in Hong Kong. Mr. Lai was arrested under the national security law, which China has been accused of using to crush dissent. The case is widely seen as a test of Hong Kong's judicial independence.
After more than 1,000 days in solitary confinement, 76-year-old Jimmy Lai arrives for his landmark trial, hidden but with the world's eyes watching. Activists and supporters lined up overnight to witness the hearing in a case widely seen as a test of Hong Kong's judicial independence.
Jimmy and others, including my party members, have been locked up for many
many months and years, so it's very sad.
Known for his personality and steadfast support of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement, he today smiled at his supporters in the courtroom. Mr Lai is facing charges of foreign collusion under what's known as the National Security Law, introduced by Beijing in 2020 to quell growing pro-democracy protests. Jimmy Lai's son Sebastian, who can't return to Hong Kong for fear of arrest, has little faith it will be a fair hearing.
It's going to be an absolute sham trial. It's a kangaroo court. As you mentioned, 3 government-appointed judges, the security minister boasting of a 100% conviction rate.
The UK's new Foreign Secretary David Cameron met with Sebastian and has toughened Britain's stance, now explicitly calling for its citizens' release.
And to be clear, these are charges for his journalism and for his peaceful pro-democracy activities.
Beijing calls Jimmy Lai a notorious anti-China figure bent on destabilising Hong Kong. But foreign governments and global advocacy groups say the sweeping national security law is being used as a weapon, with dozens of journalists and activists already prosecuted.
As a reporter outside Hong Kong, I think it is our duty to continue reporting it.
Jimmy Lai faces a maximum punishment of life in prison if found guilty. But at 76, even a shorter sentence could see him die behind bars. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News.
The federal court has allowed Brittany Higgins, former Chief of Staff, to give evidence in a closed court session of Bruce Lerman's defamation trial. Ms Higgins says Fiona Brown was the first person she disclosed her alleged rape to. The judge decided on the closed session to protect Ms Higgins' mental health. Earlier, a Veteran News executive had defended the interview with Ms Higgins on Networks 10's The Project.
More pressure on The Project. The team that put the interview to air has faced repeated questions over whether it identified Mr Lerman, even though he wasn't named. Today, former Network 10 executive Peter Meakin conceded The Project did offer more details than a story published by News.com earlier that day. You knew that many more people were likely to identify Mr Lerman from those additional facts. No, I didn't know that. It was pretty obvious, wasn't it? Not to me, it wasn't. Bruce Lerman was ultimately charged with rape, but his trial collapsed due to juror misconduct, leaving no findings against him. His lawyer also queried whether enough questions were asked about Ms Higgins' account after the government disputed her claim that she didn't receive enough support. Did you think that narrative might not be accurate? I realised it was being challenged. The court also heard from Brittany Higgins' former boss, Queensland State MP Sam O'Connor. He said Ms Higgins told him about the alleged rape soon afterwards in a phone call while she was in Perth working on the federal election campaign. I absolutely remember the word rape. That's not something that you forget. He said Ms Higgins' demeanour changed significantly after the alleged incident and she was no longer the go-getter he first met. Late today, the court cut its live stream to hear evidence from Fiona Brown, the former Chief of Staff to Ms Higgins and Mr Lerman in the office of Senator Linda Reynolds. In her closed session, Ms Brown said it did enter her mind Ms Higgins had been sexually assaulted after she met with Bruce Lerman and he left the building. But she told the court she couldn't rule it in or rule it out. Patrick Bell, ABC News.
The Northern Territory's Arts Minister has welcomed the referral of a controversial South Australian Indigenous Arts Centre to 2 federal watchdogs. Footage published by The Australian earlier this year sparked accusations that the APY Arts Centre Collective had allowed non-Indigenous assistants to improperly interfere in the creation of paintings. An independent review has since referred the collective to the ACCC and the Office for the Registrar of Indigenous Corporations. NT Arts Minister Chansey Paik wants the centre's management team to stand aside while the matter's investigated. He's calling on the Commonwealth to develop national guidelines for the management of the arts centres. Thousands of South Australian Year 12 students have received their ATARs online this morning. 40 high achievers have been recognised at a special ceremony as they prepare for tertiary studies, while others are preparing for a completely different pathway to university altogether.
It's the day thousands of South Australian students have been waiting for after 13 years of schooling.
3 minutes. Ooh.
Today is ATAR Day.
Woohoo!
Well done! High five! What a high five!
But what's your...
He's got 5 A's.
Terry Ninnis from Adelaide High School received an ATAR of 98.8.
An A+ with a merit for specialist maths, which is something I've been working towards for a while, and I was pretty confident in that.
And Mum's ecstatic.
Right now, I am so proud. I can cry. It's happy tears.
ATARs were released in South Australia today around 8:30 a.m. They will help determine what university courses students will be accepted into next year. 15,560 students completed their SACE this year, 7% more than last year.
They see themselves connected to the SACE, that school's somewhere where they can belong, and that the qualification will lead them somewhere into the future.
Yeah! 40 will receive Governor's commendations for excellence in and out of school.
I could barely sleep. I was fortunate enough to get 99.95.
I just love photography. Ended up in my 12th year becoming video director for their annual showcase.
And while not everyone will be happy with their score today, there are plenty of other opportunities, like doing a pathway course, completing further education at TAFE, going straight into the workforce, or taking a break from study.
The only thing preventing them from fulfilling their dreams is their own ambition and drive.
Thousands of futures with endless possibilities await. Vicky Natopoulos, ABC News.
This year, some farmers have finished harvesting grain earlier than when they started reaping last year. It means more families will be sitting around the Christmas table instead of sitting on a header this festive season.
The headers are rolling through the fields for a much earlier finish than normal at Thornby Homestead in the Mid-Murray. Despite wild weather and machinery troubles, it's the earliest harvest Alex McGorman has ever experienced.
Well, I think we started on the 25th of October, which I've been farming for home for 28 years, I believe, and that would be the earliest, I reckon.
While Alex wishes the recent rain had come earlier, he's excited to have more time with family this festive season.
Well, it's good, yeah, Christmas we can plan to go away. Last year we were still harvesting over the Christmas period, and it's always tough over the Christmas period. So many businesses close down, so if you do have breakdowns, it's painful.
On the York Peninsula, Tim Correll is also closing the door on another harvest.
Normally we're starting in the second week of November, so it was only a week after we normally start, so it was very early.
He finished reaping the last of his wheat and barley in late November, which means free time for festivities.
Everything's washed up and it's going to be a little bit relaxing coming into Christmas this year, which should be nice.
But it hasn't all been good news. For some farmers that didn't get their crops in early, heavy rainfall has meant crop losses for some, and it will be a busy summer spraying weeds ahead. But the challenges clearly haven't dampened the Christmas spirit. Eliza Burlage, ABC News, Renmark.
A woman has died and a man is in hospital under police guard after an alleged stabbing at Canberra's National Zoo and Aquarium. No charges have been laid and police say there's no ongoing threat to the public.
Visitors and workers' details were taken before they were ushered out with little information given in return.
They just told us exit.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of cars, like a lot of the police asking questions to people that are coming out.
She's from the same country as I am, so I'm just worried about it.
Do you know her? Who is she?
I don't know her, because nothing's been revealed yet, so I wasn't there.
Police were called to the zoo just before 1 p.m.
Witnesses have described loud screams from around the commercial kitchen area, and they responded to that.
Officers found the body of a 29-year-old female employee in a storeroom.
It's apparent at this stage that the deceased died as a result of stab wounds. A post-mortem examination will be conducted in coming days, but at this stage it looks like she's been stabbed to death with a knife.
Another employee, a 29-year-old Oaks Estate man, is now in custody. The relationship between the pair is yet to be determined.
He had apparently suffered some self-inflicted injuries and he was transported to the Canberra hospital where he remains under police guard.
At the start of the school holidays, it's normally a busy time for the zoo, but with a homicide investigation now underway, it's not certain how long it will need to remain closed.
Our thoughts are with the family and friends of the victim and the fellow workers at the National Zoo and Aquarium.
They've sent an email saying that there'll be psychologists and everyone to talk to about if you're not feeling well tomorrow.
Anyone with information about the incident is being urged to contact Crime Stoppers. Harry Frost, ABC News, Canberra.
Christmas is just around the corner, but for an increasing number of families, items normally on the menu just aren't affordable anymore. Prawns and ham have decreased slightly from last year, but it's the everyday staples that are trending upwards.
What's normally a joyous time of year is now a point of pressure for families feeling the pinch.
I love grapes actually. Back in India, grapes, I used to have it every single day, but in here it's too expensive.
Just trying to meal prep in terms of seeing what's more easy to be laid out for the week and not just jumping onto different dishes every day.
It's very hard. It's too much. I'm a pensioner. I can't afford to buy, used to buy.
Cherries like that. The cherries I couldn't even afford, like $25 a kilo. I said, oh, that's gonna be so expensive. So I thought, no, better I will not,
And the proof is in the pudding when it comes to rising costs of food this year. Dr. Christina Zorbas has been tracking prices leading up to this festive season. She thinks it's no surprise some families are cutting back.
When it comes to the Christmas lunch, things like the basics like ham and prawns are actually a bit cheaper than they were last year. But the problem is that they are still on the more expensive end of the spectrum. And when you look at more basic items like a whole chicken, that's gone up.
According to the data, food items have skyrocketed over the past 12 months. Things like mangoes, pineapples and grapes have steadily increased, along with potatoes and canned tomatoes. There's been some relief with apricots and avocados, but for staples like milk and bread, prices only seem to be going one way. Staff at Food Bank Victoria are working hard to pack relief boxes for families this Christmas. It's a job that's currently feeding more than 57,000 people per day, the highest number Food Bank's seen in 93 years.
The most people we're seeing now are people with jobs who've never had to face this sort of hardship before. We just had a market a week ago in Knox, and 80% of the people who came there, over 350 families, had never had to reach out and ask for food relief before.
What we're hoping for is just a bit of accountability from the major supermarkets and some clarity around why food prices have gone up, and then hopefully some policy measures that really ensure that food stays affordable for everyone.
Regardless of any supermarket specials, the items some people can afford to put on the Christmas table is going to look a bit different this year, which means less of this and a bit more of that, as consumers hope the new year brings in some relief. Courtney Withers, ABC News.
Coming up on 7:30 with Laura Tingle, the push to create an 18th NRL team based in Papua New Guinea.
Let's go, Tommy. Keep going, buddy. Come.
Papua New Guinea has two religions, like one is Christianity and the other is National Rugby League.
It will do justice to rugby league. We have the 18th team of NRL stationed out of Port Moresby, PNG.
Also, I'll speak to the new Premier of Queensland, Stephen Miles.
On to finance now, and share markets in Australia and overseas fell today. Here's David Chow.
Today was a bit of a downer for many share markets across the world, especially compared to last week's exuberance, which was sparked by America's central bank telegraphing its plans to cut interest rates next year. So while the Dow Jones hit another record high, it was all red across Europe and Asia after a head honcho from the US Federal Reserve pushed back against markets by reminding us that it's quite premature to be talking about rate cuts at this point, especially since inflation is still way too high. Locally, the All Ords finished its day marginally lower, but some stocks did ridiculously well, like Tabcorp, after it received a new 20-year betting licence from the Victorian government, and Link Administration, which is on the verge of being taken over by Japan's Mitsubishi Bank for $1 billion. Meanwhile, AMP has crunched the numbers on this so-called Santa rally and found that December is in fact one of the best months for the local share market, for 10 out of the last 15 years at least. And the odds also seem to be favouring the Aussie dollar, which has risen above 67 US cents, close to a 4-month high. And finally, oil prices are starting to recover again after suffering heavy losses in the past couple of months. It comes after some of the world's biggest shipping companies announced they'll stop sending their vessels through the Red Sea, where 10% of the world's trade passes through, due to recent attacks by Houthi militants on their cargo. If this drags on, it could lead to supply disruptions, which would be bad news on the inflation front. And that's finance.
Australian spinner Nathan Lyon says there's no way he's considering retirement after stamping himself as one of Test cricket's greats with his 500th wicket. Lyon became just the 3rd Australian and 8th player in the world to reach the milestone during Australia's easy first Test victory over Pakistan in Perth.
The historic moment that almost wasn't. As Pat Cummins weighed up a review.
Pat didn't want to review it.
Nate was mumbling away, he wasn't saying anything.
I think I was actually said it was high, so I got that wrong.
I was quietly confident that it would hit leg, hoping that was all
very quietly confident.
Thankfully for Nathan Lyon, the captain pulled the trigger.
Hitting the wickets, Richard.
500 Test match wickets for Nathan Lyon.
Yeah, it's something I'm very proud about. I don't think it's probably hit me yet.
500 soon became 501. As Lyon and Josh Hazlewood cleaned up the tail, with Pakistan all out for just 89. Lyon becomes the first Australian off-spinner to reach 500, joining Shane Warne and Glenn McGrath as the only Australians to pass the milestone.
I don't think it's any secret that, he's probably the most important cog in our bowling lineup.
It's been unbelievable to watch his career. Obviously, I came in sort of the second half of his career, but yeah, just a class above any other spinner.
Despite recently turning 36, Lyon has no plans to retire.
There's no way I want to give this up just yet, so if I can keep playing my role, keep trying to get better each and every day, then I'll try and play as long as I can, because I bloody love this team and I love playing cricket for Australia.
His teammates hopeful he can keep tallying up the wickets.
I still think you've got, say, 40, 50 Test matches. That's 4 or 5 years, 10 a year. Probably average, 4 a game? It's another couple hundred, 700.
Australia now has more than a week to prepare for Boxing Day in Melbourne, with Cummins hinting an unchanged lineup could be on the cards. Blake Kagi, ABC News.
The Matildas will return to Melbourne in February for a chance to book a spot in the Paris Olympics. The Victorian government announced the match against Uzbekistan will be played at Dockland Stadium on the 28th of February. It'll follow a clash in Uzbekistan 4 days earlier, with the winner of the 2-game tie to qualify for the Olympic Games in July. On to all the weather details now, but first, tonight's sunset photo was captured by Michael Puchkovsky from Port Germain Jetty. It was warm and partly cloudy across Adelaide today. In the city, the top of 31.7 degrees came at 11:30 this morning after a mild overnight low of 23.8. Further afield, there were showers about western and southern districts, and storms hit western districts, KI and southern parts of the Yorke Peninsula. It reached a scorching 45 degrees in Oodnadatta. Cloud over far north Queensland associated with troughs and a tropical low starting to encroach on the Northern Territory's Gulf country, causing some of that wet weather there, and will continue to dump heavy rain over Queensland. The troughs will also bring showers or storms down along the east, spreading into eastern areas of South Australia before a high moves into the Bight, clearing showers from our state later tomorrow. So, storms for Sydney and Canberra tomorrow, and showers for the other major centres, with 18 degrees for Melbourne, windy with 33 in Perth. Closer to home, early showers and isolated storms over the east, possibly severe in the far northeast, windy in areas of the north, and 29 degrees for Woomera. There's just the slightest chance of an early light shower across the agricultural area, but staying fine in the southern major centres, 22 degrees for Keith. A current strong wind warning for Spencer Gulf and Gulf St Vincent will continue tomorrow and extend to the upper and lower west coasts. And for Adelaide, it'll become windy tonight with the medium chance of showers, clearing tomorrow. 21 degrees for the city, down to 14 overnight. On the waters, southerly winds to 25 knots, with seas increasing to 2 metres north of Grange. The sun will rise around 6 o'clock and set just before 8:30. And it's looking pretty good for the rest of the week ahead, with the temperature climbing to a top of 27 on Friday and Saturday, 24 degrees on Christmas Eve, and the same again for Christmas Day. And that's the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thanks very much for your company. Stay with us. Laura Tingle's up next with 7:30.